Brady's pass is intercepted and returned for a touchdown.
This was Tom Brady's final pass as a Patriot. But how did we get here? Pick number 199. This tall, gangly kid out of Michigan finally hears his name called. This kid's name is Tom Brady. Brady's selection went largely unnoticed, as many thought he was at best a career backup coming out of college, a role he'd assume until 2001 when Patriots starting quarterback Drew Bledsoe would suffer a sheared blood vessel in his chest. This now infamous hit laid on by Mo Lewis in the second week of the 2001 NFL season would be the spark needed to ignite the most storied dynasty in NFL history. However, over the course of 20 years, this storied dynasty would simultaneously form a rift that was rife with resentment. And this resentment came in large part initially from Bill Belichick's corner. Over the years, despite being the individual who established the Patriots' nearly impenetrable foundation, Belichick has constantly found himself in Brady's shadow. Belichick, in his mind, never truly received the credit that he felt he deserved. Ultimately, Belichick came to the realization that the only way for him to garner the lump sum of credit for the dynasty in retrospect was to prove that he could do it without Brady and to win a ring with another quarterback. So in steps Jimmy Garoppolo, a small school quarterback taken with the 62nd pick of the 2014 NFL Draft. And Belichick had plans to take this small school quarterback under his wing and work to mold him into the ideal quarterback for Belichick's Patriots post-Brady. And in lieu of Tom Brady in 2016, Garoppolo would go 2-0, which gave Belichick confidence in his project quarterback moving forward. So much so that Belichick was ready to cut the cord and deal Brady off to another team heading into 2017. That said, Belichick would soon learn that it wasn't only the media who valued Brady over him, as Brady had ownership of the Patriots in his back pocket, and this attempted trade would end up backfiring on Belichick, as he'd be forced to find a new home for his pride and joy. And because of this, a rift that was initially one-dimensional became mutual, with Brady now knowing that the writing was on the wall for him, as he'd later disclose in his interview with Howard Stern. And 2 years later, with Brady's contract at the end of his ropes, we arrive here. Brady's final game as a New England Patriot. The 2019 NFL season had been really unlike any other for Belichick and Brady's Patriots, as they endured unprecedented struggles on offense due to a lack of supporting cast for Brady. However, they'd still managed to make it to the playoffs on the back of their lethal defense, spearheaded by Defensive Player of the Year Stephon Gilmore. Though this year, things would be different, as the Patriots were to host on Wildcard Weekend following a shocking Week 17 loss to the lowly 5-11 Miami Dolphins, and the Patriots would follow this up by falling to Derrick Henry's Titans in the playoffs, a team which would go on to have a Cinderella story in its own right, but that's for another video. And immediately after this loss, heading into the offseason with his contract in New England up, speculation was rampant surrounding Brady's future. A narrative which initially felt like the media's cheap reach for clicks would soon turn into a very plausible outcome as the offseason progressed and rumors began to surface of Brady's apparent desire to take his talent elsewhere. These rumors would eventually culminate with Brady announcing his intentions to scour the free agency market and search for a new suitor on March 17th of 2020. And within a few hours after his initial announcement, Brady had found his new suitor in the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who brought him in on a 2-year deal worth $50 million. And with a loaded roster including weapons the likes of Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, and later with the addition of Rob Gronkowski, the Buccaneers shot up from mediocrity in terms of fan perspective within a matter of moments. With the addition of Tom Brady, the most accomplished player in NFL history, the return of Rob Gronkowski, the greatest tight end of all time, and 2 top 10 wide receivers each coming off of 1,000-yard seasons, the sheer offensive firepower had fans clamoring about how this was the perfect marriage and how with Brady the Buccaneers were destined for the promised land. But with all this hype, no one has really stopped to ask, what if it's all too good to be true? What if Brady goes belly up with the Buccaneers, not living up to the almost unrealistic hype? Can this super team live up to the sky-high Super Bowl or bust expectations that have been set? And if they don't, how will it affect Brady's legacy moving forward? Now, on one side of the coin, you have the argument that Brady is 43 years old and is undoubtedly at the tail end of his career. He was the pilot of the greatest dynasty in NFL history, and if he sputters out in Tampa, you could just simply point to Brady's 2019 season with the Patriots as foreshadowing for this fall from grace. I mean, how much can you really expect out of a 43-year-old quarterback? And while this argument does have some legs, The issue is that, especially with a roster as loaded as the Buccaneers, many will not take this excuse at face value. Not only that, but failure to live up to expectations will inevitably subsequently help to bolster up the ongoing narrative that Brady was merely the product of Belichick's system. There's a lot of pressure on Brady's shoulders leading into the 2020 NFL season. You're kind of damned if you do and damned if you don't in Brady's case, and had Brady never left New England, his legacy would be virtually unquestionable. But since he decided to leave in an effort to prove Belichick wrong, if he falls short of a Super Bowl, his legacy will inevitably be left scarred. Failure is not an option in this case, and with the supporting cast Brady has combined with Brady's legendary legacy, the public perception is that Brady has to win a Super Bowl with this quote-unquote super team. But with that said, my expectations for Brady's Buccaneers are low relative to the general public's. A lot of my skepticism stems from the coach-quarterback duo of Bruce Arians and Tom Brady. Now, I want to drive home the point that I'm not questioning Arians and his capabilities as a head coach. Rather, I want to spend some time pointing out some of the common threads seen with any quarterback that's played under Arians' offensive scheme so that you can gain a better understanding as to why this pairing makes me skeptical. Arians is a gambling man that likes to take big risks, and his offensive scheme is a reflection of this no risk it, no biscuit characteristic, with the quarterback airing the ball out at a noticeably disproportionate level when compared to any other quarterback under any other offensive scheme, often dialing up big shots down the field at a disproportionate level to other quarterbacks as well. All this combined with the sheer complexity and bulk of his playbook causes quarterbacks to struggle within their first year under Arians' offensive scheme, commonly leading to an inflated interception total. It's an offensive scheme that really takes time to fully comprehend and master, almost never operating at its peak efficiency within the first year of its implementation. That said, while I do think Brady and Arians will sit down and create some workarounds to better fit Brady and what he's used to, that doesn't take away from my initial point. There's a reason to be hesitant about the Brady-Arians pairing, at least in its infancy. The issue with this, though, is the fact that the general public is not going to look at the context if Brady doesn't live up to their almost unrealistic expectations. Rather, your average sports fan will simply look at the team's record, look at Brady's presumed inflated interception total, and come to the conclusion that Brady is the biggest fraud in NFL history. Now, that said, while I am prepared for hitches, I ultimately think that passing judgment if Brady doesn't live up to this hype in his first season with Tampa is simply unfair. Because you shouldn't be looking forward to Brady's first year in Tampa. You should be looking forward to year 2. Brady thought ahead and requested that a no-trade clause be attached to his 2-year contract. And he did this because the upside of this no-risk-it, no-biscuit offensive scheme far outweighs the downside. Once fully mastered by the pilot, Arians' offensive scheme propels his offensive unit significantly, almost always producing one of the most deadly offenses in the league. And the inflated interception total is replaced by inflated touchdown and yardage totals. A prime example of this growth process can be found with Carson Palmer. In year 1 with the Cardinals under Bruce Arians, Carson Palmer passed for 24 touchdowns to 22 interceptions. However, in year 2 prior to injury, Carson Palmer passed for 11 touchdowns with just 3 interceptions. And in year 3, where the Cardinals ranked second only to the 15-1 Carolina Panthers in offensive production, Palmer managed to pass for 35 touchdowns, which is 11 more than year 1, while simultaneously cutting his interception total in half compared to his total in year 1, only throwing 11 interceptions. And this is a common thread we've seen with any quarterback under Arians' offensive scheme. We likely even saw it with Jameis Winston in 2019, however, we'll never know as Jameis was never given that opportunity to play out his second year. And the likelihood of this precedent excluding Tom Brady is slim to none. Now, assuming the Buccaneers are able to maintain that core of players leading into 2021, I think the 2021 Tampa Bay Buccaneers have the chance to make a serious run at a Lombardi. That said, with this well-established precedent in mind, I don't think it's fair to look at 2020 as Super Bowl or bust. Now, your average sports fan is not going to take really any of this into account. There's many nuances within all of this that your average sports fan simply doesn't think nor care about, and it's inevitable that this lack of regard for context will ultimately lead to the perpetuation of numerous negative narratives surrounding Brady in the 2021 offseason. And it's likely that the NFL media is going to stoke this fire, as we'll likely see a common talking point in the 2021 NFL offseason media cycle that latches on to this narrative and will use a down year in Tampa to question Brady's legacy. By leaving New England, Brady put his legacy on the line. And again, while you could easily argue that he's 43 years old and question whether this quote-unquote blemish really matters, the point is that there wouldn't have been a debate surrounding the validity of his legacy had he just stayed put. Much like Arians' offensive scheme, though, Brady decided to risk it for the biscuit. And if he manages to live up to these otherworldly expectations, his legacy will transcend into that of folklore. However, if history is anything to go off of, then Brady has a bumpy road ahead in 2020.